All right, let's talk, shall we? Let's talk about Amazon's Rings of Power, their adaptation of, or their alleged adaptation of Tolkien's magnum opus, The Lord of the Rings. Now, the first thing to say is that this is not an adaptation of Tolkien's writings. They had the rights to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, including the appendices, which I have just recently reread. This would have given them ample material for the downfall of Numenor, the corruption of the royal house of Numenor by Sauron, the wars of the Numenorians in the south of Middle-earth, and the arrival of the Astari into Middle-earth. They have chosen to adapt none of that. Now, what good can I say about the 3 hours that I've watched of this thing? The visuals are, by and large, pretty. The CGI is immaculate, as is to be expected for a billion-dollar production. The set design is serviceable. I appreciated the Byzantine touches in Numenor. As I am a Byzantine Christian, I found that quite nice. This is where my praise for the show will stop. It is visually pretty. There is nothing else to recommend it, as long as one considers it as an adaptation of the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. Were this to have a different title, say, Power Rings, an original Amazon production, I'd be like, this is cheesy, but I could get behind this. I might even be interested to see where it goes. I am not interested to see where the Rings of Power go. The world feels generic in the extreme. That is to say that everything is indifferentiable from itself. The Southlands seem no different than the North, which seem no different than Numenor. This is a problem. There is nothing geographically distinct about any area that is gone to. And no matter how much panning and zooming one does over a map, that is something that makes it very hard to tell what is actually supposed to be happening. There is no real sense of the geography. Furthermore, the Southlands present a problem. We might pan in on the area that will one day become Gondor when we show the map. We might even pan in closer on an area that will one day become Mordor. However, an elvish guard who is keeping the people of this land under lock and key, apparently, calls the place Harad. Harad is not anywhere near Gondor. Harad is a different continent, in fact, from Middle-earth, and lies far to the south. It is Tolkien's Africa. However, we are shown rolling European-style grasslands. And the people who dwell in Harad are Europeans. This is a problem. The Haradrim should be swarthy, at the least, if not black. Their appearances should mirror those of our real-world North Africa, at the lightest. This is, after all, where the great Oliphants of the War of the Ring came from. The Mumakil, and the people who rode upon them were the Haradrim. So, white, Northern European Haradrim are a problem. But let us say that I overlook this. After all, Peter Jackson actually never clearly showed the faces of the Haradrim, except maybe once or twice. And there they might have been European or might have been North African, as there is certainly a bit of overlap in feature. I am very dark skinned, despite being purely European, because I come from Southeastern Europe, or at least my family did. It is, therefore, conceivable that a North African might look something like a Southeastern European. There was, after all, extensive trade between North Africa and Southern Europe. However, they should not appear as Northern Europeans, that is to say, exceptionally fair of skin and bright of hair. This is not to say that they should be ugly or anything like that, but rather that Amazon has taken an opportunity to rob actors who are of North African or Middle Eastern or even Sub-Saharan African descent of a role that is quite literally built for them within the structure of Tolkien's world. I hope that this does not go unnoticed by viewers. Let us turn our gaze northward to Eriador, or rather to the Vale of Anduin, where we should find the Hobbitlan, the Hole Builders, the ancestors of the hobbits. But when we look for their burrows, we find nothing. Why? Because Amazon, in their wisdom, have transmogrified the Hobbitlan, the Hole Builders, from Hole Builders to gypsies, and gypsies of the most annoying stereotype, I might add. I've heard people call them cute. They are not. They seem filthy. They seem disrespectful to me. They are broad stereotypes of the worst sort, running about with grime on their faces and twigs in their hair as they pull their little carts across the land, leaving behind any who can't keep up with a callous coldness that I find unacceptable in a hobbit. These are not hobbits, nor are they Harfoots, which is what the show is intent on calling them. The Harfoots, after all, were an ethnicity of the hobbits. And as a hobbit ethnicity, were the closest with mortal men, and potentially slightly with the dwarves, dwelling near the dwellings of dwarves for a long time. However, all hobbits of any of the three ethnicities, that is, the Stoors, the Fallowhides, and, yes, the Harfoots, should have come initially from the Vale of Anduin, collectively known by the ancestors of the Rohirrim as the Hobbitlan. I find their gypsy appearance insulting both to gypsies and to hobbits. The problems run deeper still. A fiery comet streaks from the sky, and a man, incapable of speech, lands upon the ground. He is incapable of speech, but very capable of magic, and demonstrates this to great effect, killing some fireflies just to make a pattern in the sky. This might be Gandalf. It might not be. We don't know. We are given this as a literal mystery box. And I do not like it. I find it insulting to my intelligence. Amazon is obviously trying to keep those who have read the books guessing. I do not wish to guess. I would far rather simply be told that, yes, they are in fact destroying something I loved and telling me to enjoy that. That would at least be true, as opposed to lying to me, which is what they have been doing. But our problems run deeper still. Now we come to characters who are actually named in Tolkien's writings. Elrond, Galadriel, Gil-galad, Celeborn, Durin, Dis, Tar Miriel, and Ar-Pharazôn. None of these act in their character from the books, and I do not mean necessarily their character from the Silmarillion, to which Amazon does not own the rights. I mean from their characters as described in the appendices and main body text of The Lord of the Rings, a work which Amazon does have the rights to, and which therefore they do not get a pass for straying from. Let's start with the most egregious of changes, that of the character of Galadriel. Galadriel, leader of the Galadrim, Lady of the Golden Wood. Commander of the Northern armies? No. Never was she that in Tolkien's writings. Indeed, by the end of the Second Age, when this show is set, Galadriel should be dwelling in Lothlorien with her husband Celeborn and daughter Celebrian. Celebrian being Elrond's wife and the mother of Arwen. However, no sign of Celeborn can be found, nor of Celebrian. Galadriel herself acts not with the queenly grace of an ancient and powerful elf queen. Instead, I'm fairly sure I've seen a few women like her in the supermarket demanding to speak to the manager. Yeah, indeed, she does demand to speak to Elrond's manager. It's phrased slightly more prettily as requesting an audience with the king, but nonetheless, that is what she does. And she does this again when she arrives in Numenor. She is abrasive, terse, sharp-spoken, not particularly intelligent. This is all a problem with the writing. Morfydd Clark, the woman playing her, is pretty enough, but fails to capture the ethereal grace of one of the oldest of the Eldar. Gil-galad is much reduced, as is Elrond. Elrond appearing as a young and inexperienced political sort, rather than as the noble and warlike herald of Gil-galad's army. Celebrimbor, the forger of all the rings of power save only the one, seems more like a grandmother from a sitcom than a powerful elven smith. In fact, the only character who seems reasonably true to how he should be is Durin the Fourth, and even he is a bit strange. You see, the dwarves believed, according to Gimli, which was relayed in the appendix of The Lord of the Rings, that Durin, the father of one of the seven houses of the dwarves and king of Durin's folk, that is, the house of Durin, reincarnated for 5 generations, and he lived a terribly long time indeed, even in each of his incarnations. Hundreds of years each time, if not thousands. Dis, the dwarven princess of the line of Durin, is transformed into Disa, Durin the Fourth's wife. I have no problem with her, per se. At least as far as her character is concerned, she is pleasant enough, which is a welcome change from Galadriel. Queen Regent Miriel also should not exist. Tar Miriel, Queen of Numenor, was not queen for long before the throne was claimed by Ar-Pharazôn, her cousin, and she was forced unwillingly into marriage with him and was given a new name in the Númenórean tongue, Ar being king in Númenórean, and Tar being king or queen, ruler, in Quenya. Pharazôn, for his part, seems content to sit at the sidelines, a far cry from the ambitious Ar-Pharazôn the Golden of the Akallabeth, the man who made war upon the shores of Middle-earth, is now merely an attendant. This is strange to me. Galadriel continues to be insufferable. I do not know why they chose to make her like this. Perhaps they thought that it was empowering for a woman to act like that. However, I trust that the same people who thought that empowering have also been at the receiving end of a fair few of that sort of woman's tongue lashings in a store. In fact, Galadriel reminds me of nothing so much as the stereotypical Karen, an upper-class white woman who feels privilege beyond any reasonable expectation, and who demands to be waited on hand and foot at every opportunity. I expect her to ask for her pumpkin spice latte, not to lead the Galadhrim in Lothlorien. That is my impression of this series so far. Nothing makes sense. There has been no attempt to move the story forward whatsoever. Instead, we are given schizophrenic cutting between different plot threads, none of which seem inclined to line up with each other anytime soon. We are nearly halfway through the first season, and yet I have no idea what the plot is actually going to be. I feel they want to keep us guessing. However, that is a bad strategy. It leads to boredom and disinterest. Boredom and disinterest, which I had to fight through merely to finish the 3 episodes already released. And that is why I am unlikely to watch the 4th. There is some strange plot in the Southlands involving orcs and wargs that skitter about like insects. I really couldn't care less. There is an orc with an elvish name, and I don't care about him. Halbrand is an Aragorn stand-in who gets in unnecessary fights and steals things. I don't care about him either. Galadriel is reduced to an insufferable twerp, and I don't care about her. Elrond has perhaps the most charisma of all the elves, but that's not saying much. Indeed, the most charismatic figure in the entire show is Durin. And again, that is not saying much, as he mostly channels John Rhys Davies' Gimli to little effect. He at least seems like a dwarf, which is more than I can say for any of the elves, who seem like mere mortals. Arondir has been described by a friend of mine as Tuvok Greenleaf, and I cannot find it in my heart to disagree. So, the Haradrim are reduced to some Northern European-style villagers. The hobbits are reduced to the Harfoots. little people who scurry about in caravans with twigs in their hair. The elves seem more mortal than ethereal. And the men, well, what can I say? The Númenóreans lack anything to show themselves forth as Númenóreans. In fact, they seem hardly any different than the people of the Southlands. And while their grand Byzantine-style city is pretty to look at, it ultimately falls short. Costumes, and especially weapons, are simultaneously over and under designed. I am a sword maker. I know how swords are built and function, and the swords used in the series strike me as plastic props, not deadly weapons of war. The armor is clunky at best, a far cry from Peter Jackson's films, where the Nazgul wore beautifully constructed and perfectly fitted Gothic armor, where you could see the influence of the Milanese and also of the ancient Greek and Roman in the Númenóreans, where the Rohirrim seemed to have ridden straight from underneath an Anglo-Saxon burial mound. No such care was taken here. Many of the designs could easily be slotted into a science fiction show, and I would not be able to tell the difference. The production design suffers from the lack of people who actually understand the subject on which they were hired to pontificate. The dialogue is clunky, making the worst excesses of George Lucas in the prequel trilogy seem fluid and elegant. So it is boring, unfocused, an insult to Tolkien's work. Will I watch the rest of it? Unless something dramatically changes in episode 4, the answer is a resounding no. I am not interested in it. The characters are idiots who spout platitudes that make no sense. The Harfoots are distinctly unlikable. The Southlanders, the Haradrim, are robbed of their power and nobility, as are the Númenóreans. I could go on in circles about what I didn't like. However, at the end of the day, it mostly comes down to the fact that I've been told that I have to like this, despite being bored by it, despite finding the production design lacking, despite finding the script writing lacking, despite finding the casting baffling. The pace moves like molasses in January, a gentle sludge going nowhere fast. As I said, 3 episodes in, and I still don't understand where they think they're going with this. If I'm right, given that they have already greenlit 5 seasons, the answer is, as I said, nowhere fast. For that reason, I must give this show perhaps 2 out of 5. Passable, generic fantasy that is simply too slow-paced to hold my attention, even though I generally like what I consider to be decompressed storytelling. I have read the books in their entirety many times, and I have read the Silmarillion. This is not an adaptation of any of it. This is, I would say, fan fiction, But the people who wrote this were very obviously not fans of Tolkien. For that reason, among others. My score drops to perhaps at best a 1 out of 10. It is truly bad. And I do not desire to see any more of it. I will continue to watch reviews and observe the train wreck from a distance, and perhaps they'll be able to rescue it in the second season. But given that Harad is apparently in Europe, I do not have high hopes. Thank you for watching, if you indeed did. And like, comment, subscribe if you want to do those things. Have a good day.